Hi, this is Colin Hung with Healthcare IT Today. I'm sitting down with Mike Luessi, General Manager of Global Healthcare and Life Sciences at ServiceNow. Mike, thanks for sitting down with me today.
My pleasure, Colin. Thanks for the invitation.
First of all, I have to say your background looks awesome. I really like it's the right proportion, meaning it looks like you're there.
Yeah, reminiscing of being in an office when all of us have been remote for about a year now, right?
Just crazy. That's crazy. And well, actually, that's a good segue into one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with you today is your company sent over some information around what you're doing to help this last mile of the COVID vaccine. And I got to be honest, I would not have thought that ServiceNow was getting involved in this area. So maybe you can expand on that for us. Tell us a little bit what you're doing and kind of why ServiceNow is getting involved in this.
Yeah, happy to. And if you look at where things are at globally, we are in an event that we've never seen something like this before. And so we talk about it as being the greatest workflow challenge of our lifetime. And being a workflow company and looking to automate as many things that we can to make the world of work better for people, bring that right back to vaccines. And while the world is focused on especially the scientific accomplishments, and the fact that we got a vaccine and multiple vaccines in the market in less than a year when it traditionally takes 10 years, if not
Right.
longer, it is amazing. What we did though was looked at where we thought that things would break, and
Mm.
and where things were going to break was in that last mile. And so we kind of, if you go back in time, what we were doing and kind of talking about that point of maybe customers have historically known us in one area, right? Where you say, I wouldn't have thought you were over here. Yeah, we've had great success helping solve challenges in IT.
Right.
We've also had great success in solving challenges for employee experiences. And then we've continued to build on that across our customer workflows solutions. And so if you take the stat of 7.8 billion people and assume at some point children will be part of the vaccination process, that's greater than 15 billion doses that need to be administered in a 12-month period of time. And we may have to rinse and repeat this process next year. And so everything about that last mile on going from vaccines to vaccinations is workflow driven. It's a lot of people, more people than we've ever thought before in terms of not only the clinical staff and the patients and citizens as a whole, but the number of settings that it's taking place. I mean, we're now having stadiums being used for vaccinations. We have traditional hospitals. You're seeing large employers getting into the conversation on how they figure it out. And so we look and say more places, more people, more devices, and more things to track in this process. It just adds complexity to the workflows. And so we felt we were very uniquely positioned to help solve that last mile challenge.
So what are some of the specific things that you're doing to help organizations with their vaccines rollout, Mike?
It varies.
Okay.
We one of our public announcements was NHS Scotland. So NHS Scotland is leveraging our vaccine administration management solution to vaccinate all 5.5 million of their citizens. And so if you break down like what's really needed in that, and we approached this kind of challenge through the lens of how do you build out a command center, and that command center needed to have different components. So one of the components was patient citizen engagement. And so if you break that at the kind of into its kind of subcomponents, is one, knowledge is super important. So how do you inform patients or citizens as a whole to keep them up to date on what's going on and give them clarity on what to expect, being one part. Next part was, how do you schedule them and schedule them efficiently? So for NHS Scotland, it was bulk upload. You need to be able to bulk schedule your citizens, and because not everybody was going to necessarily be super tech savvy and would want to use a virtual agent or a portal, you're going to send out letters. And once they take that letter and they know, they need to be informed that they've been bulk scheduled and come in. And so we looked at the market through a couple different lenses, one of them being that supply would be the constraint that dictated everything. And from that, within the solutions of okay, if supply is going to be constrained, people are going to be nervous about when is their turn. What should I expect when it's my turn? What should I expect about the vaccine? Should I be concerned about the vaccine? And so that knowledge, that bulk scheduling, the ability to reschedule, the ability to have pre-built kind of criteria in the system to know if you're receiving one vaccine, the booster needs to be delivered on this date versus the other vaccine. And again, drive predictability so you didn't see a collapse of the infrastructure became paramount. So knowledge, engagement, making sure that the contact center could still receive calls and they could schedule for those that maybe aren't going to use the portal or the virtual agent to interact. And that you could also collect all the information you needed up front to make it very easy. So once that they presented themselves for the visit and to get the vaccine, that you weren't using paper-based process to get everything done. So making it contactless.
So you're really talking about using your workflow capability to make that patient experience of getting vaccinated very smooth, right? Everything
Yeah,
from building that trust, as you said, with informing me of what's going to happen when I arrive and what the information I need to know about the vaccine itself, to scheduling me, which I hadn't even thought of bulk scheduling. That's really cool. And then right to the check-in process and all those kinds of things, like just making that whole thing very, very seamless.
correct. And so, I think you have to look at personas in terms of who's going to be using which piece and who's going to be interacting with it. So that patient citizen persona and what's the experience like for them, the clinician experience. So if you go back to that stat of 7.8 billion people, and you think about how many people there are that actually do the jabs, right, to
Right.
get the shots into the arm, you also have to bring more people back into the workflow, right? So now you have to also bring more people in, allow them to be in multiple settings, and make sure that one, they're educated, so they also have the right knowledge. Two, that they know what the procedure is that they should follow, so we're driving consistency, predictability in that process.
Right.
And then the last part, that it makes it easy for them to document what they did and report out on that. And so, from the patient experience to the clinician experience to then other officials that kind of sit further in the stream and make sure they know how many people have been vaccinated, how much wastage there is, kind of all goes together. And that's where just an unprecedented level of collaboration, unprecedented level of the complexity of these workflows that go through. And so we've looked at it as, how do you streamline the tracking of the distribution and the inventory pieces? How do you make sure that it's a great experience overall for somebody going through that, especially when they feel really nervous? I know for my in-laws, they just got vaccinated in the last week, and in order for them to do it, because it was so complex, my sister-in-law had to schedule their appointment, and they were in line at, I think it was 3:15 a.m. to hopefully get vaccinated. And I look at this and I still think there's so much work to be done, right? Like, everybody's figuring this out real time, but it is all workflow driven. It is all broken within that last mile. And the great thing is the technology exists. The platform was built to solve these types of problems. And so right now we're in the mode of helping as many people as possible.
So you talk about this, the patient communication side of things. You've talked a little bit about the sort of when you arrive and the check-in process. I mean, these are all aspects of what we call patient access, right? It sounds like what you've built can be applied in that area. Is that something that ServiceNow is looking to do or has been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So breaking down, if we take patient access, and patient access being the ability to do outreach and communication and really share the right information, set expectations, receive feedback right in the process in case you need to improve that communication, the ability to do the scheduling and the check-in, and to streamline that onboarding process, like all the pre-visit and capturing consent. Frankly, that was not a great experience before the pandemic. I think there was a lot of activities where organizations were trying to figure out how to do it, especially provider organizations, providers and payers. If you think about the market and really the constituents that are being served right now around being vaccinated, it's that 65 plus generation. And that 65 plus generation was already the big shift in the market that was taking place, where you have 10,000 people a day turning 65 just in the US alone. And so we knew that the pressure was building. We looked at the lens of, it's not a great experience, it's tons of broken workflows, heavily based on email, heavily based on spreadsheet tracking, heavily based on paper-based movement and faxes, and that there needs to be a better way, and that we have to be able to scale up to serve that generation and to serve others. And really what we saw was the pandemic just accelerated that transformation. I've seen others talk about things that would take 10 years are now happening in 3 to 5. In some parts of the market, we're seeing things that probably would have taken 5 to 10 years that are happening right now, and will continue to happen over the next 2 years. So while the pandemic has been terrible in so many ways, it's really encouraging to see the transformation that's taking place. And I think it'll actually put everybody, humanity, in a better position to handle the events like a pandemic in the future, but also just to provide a better experience from day one for all of us.
So you touched on something I want to explore a little bit more, which is, this age group, and I hate to stereotype, but this age group that is 65 or older, and there's many more coming. That Silver Tsunami, as people talk about it, which is already here. We've heard that there is concern that they are reluctant to adopt new technology, that they are not willing or able to perhaps to go and download the app or the portal or use it. Even email or texting may be beyond what they are comfortable doing. Like, how do you factor all of that in to what you're doing? Or is that wrong? Are people actually okay with adopting these if they're only taught properly?
It's we see all of it. I think I do think that stereotype, I can speak firsthand from anybody that I know that's all the way up into their 90s. They all have smartphones. Their comfortability on how they use those in different settings varies. And so our approach is to look at it to say, it's not a one size fits all. It's more about having modular based solutions. And back to my comment around personas, you can break that persona of a patient or a citizen down into a number of different groups. And so for us, we looked at it from a solution perspective of, one, giving the ability for that mobile experience; two, leveraging the benefits of virtual agent, right? Asking the right questions, getting somebody to an answer very quickly. And for the part of the population that wants to use that experience, that's great, because what it means is it frees up the contact center for those that may feel less comfortable using it, or just are less familiar with it, so they want to call in. And so as like in NHS Scotland, they started off by sending out paper-based statements as they tie in for this bulk scheduling. And that was one thing that we did was really unique from the beginning, was we assumed, again, from supply being constrained during this entire pandemic. And I still, if you look at the news right now, supply doesn't seem to open up until fall. Right? And so I think the market will be dictated, and the solutions will need to be aligned based on supply constraints along the way. And so right now we see huge uplift in wanting to be able to use bulk scheduling. How do you get people in there and just get them matched up and quickly get through the backlog of those that want the vaccine, that have already registered for the vaccine? We see the market will change over time, and it'll be more of like that self-service type of request as you go through it. And so it becomes critical that whatever the need is in there, that it's modular, that it takes into consideration the solutions that already existed. It's not like we weren't doing vaccines before the pandemic. We've been vaccinating, you and I, we've probably been vaccinated multiple times, right, over our lifetime. And so it's being cognizant of the fact that solutions already exist in different ways. They were never meant to be able to scale up to this type of level, nor all these various types of settings. And they also kind of took a one size fits all approach to, everybody's going to flow through this process this way. And so that's where, like, the modularity of a solution, the way we thought about it was, make sure that you can consume bits and pieces for what you need, and that our strength has always been in that being that system of action. And so, if the system of access already exists, great, figure out what that is and what that interaction is going to look like, and then tie in with the systems of record. And so it's, I think that's really unique for us. And it's something where, from over the years, we've gone across IT, employee, and customer. And for those that have been our customers for a long time, they think, I think one of the questions is, like where you started was, I wouldn't have thought that you were in the vaccine management piece. But if you look at it and you think about all the workflows that are in that, it's like a natural fit, because we're cutting across all those and we're getting rid of all the slack in this process and helping people spend their time on the things that matter.
So just putting it another way, people have already invested in patient communication systems. People may have already invested in the check-in system, even the self-scheduling. But to do it in this sort of bulk manner, trying to do 7 million people at one time, these systems were never designed for that. And so, am I hearing you're saying that ServiceNow can come in and help with that, like help leverage those existing systems and use them in a way so that you can achieve this level of scale?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going in, so going in with a big monolithic system and going in and saying you have to consume all of this will not work. Right? Like it's a challenging approach for those that have tried it, because it's just too much burden on a system that is already at its breaking point. And so from a ServiceNow perspective, it is that modular pieces. So if somebody has these parts already, great, what's that workflow look like? And then be able to map out and say, we're going to take information from here, we're now going to run it through, and we're going to drive the following experience. And that experience is going to be better than it was before, because we're taking out all the different steps. I heard one example that, and it was prior to the pandemic, I think it was during flu shots, is that one of the states, and I think it was a county, had to call in the National Guard to do one thing, take paper-based forms and do data entry into the next system, feed it over. And so think about calling in the military to not protect the vaccines or whatever serum it is, call them in to do data entry. There's a better way, right? You can workflow all of that.
Gotcha. So Mike, I'm gonna put you on the spot with a couple of questions here, but
Okay.
if given all the different customer work you've done and all the people you're helping right now, if there's one thing that you would recommend people address in this vaccine rollout, what would it be? Would it be the communication part? Would it be the education part? Would it be the check-in part? Is there sort of one area that stands out going, man, just fix that? If you're going to fix one thing, just fix that one first.
I'd answer it based on the phase that we're in right now. And the phase that we're in right now is, don't let a single drop go to waste, because supply is so constrained. And so it is that engagement and scheduling piece, and making sure that you have solved where you've worked your way through the backlog. And so you can do that bulk scheduling, and then you can allow for the self-scheduling after that. That is what's going to get us to a point where we can consume all the available vaccines, and get us to the next point. And so it would be, don't waste a drop because your workflow is broken. And just
Gotcha.
improve upon that.
And if I, like another question to put you on the spot, if I was a CEO of a hospital or a large group practice, and I was sort of hearing about ServiceNow for the first time and knowing you only from the IT side or from the HR stuff, what would you say to me to say, no, we know healthcare, or you know my world? What would you say to me if I was sort of in that mindset of only understanding ServiceNow in that context?
Yeah, well, I'm in lots of those conversations, along
Okay.
with a very large team that focuses on this every day. And those conversations go from when you talk about like the CEO or someone of a CXO title outside of the CIO, whether that's a large employer, provider, payer, government. We see everything right now is, we don't go in and talk about the technology. Right? We talk about we see a problem in that last mile. We anticipated it was going to have problems. And because we thought the problems would arise, we thought the problems would actually show up in the following places, and that we built solutions around that to help solve those. And then we show them how we've approached it and how they can solve for it. So it's not a it's not a bits and bytes or capabilities conversation. It's a conversation around how do you get from vaccines to vaccinations quickly without wasting anything and without creating a ton of extra work that adds little to no value. Now, from that, a common response is, I didn't know. I didn't know that ServiceNow did all of these other things. And so it's I really love that when they see all the areas that we can help, and that this is a great example of something that is so meaningful, that this is our greatest work challenge. And being able to see how you can leverage the platform to solve that, amazing. For those that have known us for a long time, right, as I mentioned before, is if they've used us in other areas, they look and they say, makes total sense to me, right? Like, it's not like, it doesn't seem abnormal, because they're like, it's a workflow, lots of different things are broken, you guys keep innovating on this. And I give you an example on the vaccine administration management product that we launched. We're on a 2-week release cycle on that. And so, what gets me excited every day here is, one, we can move at the speed and the agility of a startup, but we bring the confidence and the capacity of a very mature company that knows how to deal with security, knows how to scale up and make sure that it's not going to break in the process. And you combine that maturity of a big business along with the speed that we can move at as kind of a startup model in terms of those 2-week release cycles. That's where I think, specifically for this pandemic, we add tremendous value, because the pandemic will keep throwing curveballs at us. Like, who knows what next month is, who knows what the month is after that, but being able to have flexibility to pivot all along the way. So that's where, getting past that, I didn't know you could do all these things, but once they see it, they don't ask how we do it, they just say, do it quicker.
Awesome. And Mike, final question, where can people find out more information about your offerings?
You can go to servicenow.com. We have a number of things out there around our solution. There's also a video. So if you want to invest a minute, I think it's 1 minute and 10 seconds, or even out on YouTube, you can look for ServiceNow Vaccine Administration Management, and you'll see a great example of from the patient experience to the clinician experience and beyond.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for the information you shared. I enjoyed talking to you about patient access and the sort of last mile problem, because you're so right. It is such a big challenge for healthcare, having never done a vaccination of this scale in decades. So it's great that companies like yours are helping out those that are kind of a little overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, and you know what? It's an honor to be a part of that solution to a very complex problem. And what I think is meaningful for all of us, and the work that you're doing as you ask these types of questions, is that we collectively are building the future for all of us. And based on what we're seeing right now, even though it may be chaotic, I think that future can be very bright together. And so thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.
No, it's great. Thank you so much. This has been Colin Hung with Mike Luessi from ServiceNow. Thanks for listening.